I've noticed that sales have suddenly picked up. I think people just got used to 7% 30-year fixed rate mortgages being the new normal.
There have been 44 sales over $10 million.
A lot of buyers entering the marketplace, not just people moving to Florida to rent, but people looking here to buy. The day before he got elected, a 30-year fix was 6.1%, and today I guess it's 7.1 and went up a full 100 basis points, a full 1%. Which is somewhat ironic because he campaigned on, I'm going to lower rates. When he says words like tariffs, he ignites the inflation conversation. There are a lot of pre-construction projects in the pipeline. Now, of those, there's only about 12 that are actually under construction. The rest of them are waiting for interest rates to come down.
Oh my God, we're back again. Episode 62 of the Better Decisions podcast. I am excited to have back in the office Craig Studnicky. Thank you so much for doing this. Craig is head of ISG Related. Welcome back.
Thanks, David.
Everything is much the same. We actually have a bigger David Sumistruk sign.
Your sign's
we're getting more professional, I guess.
You did that because I'm in my 60s and my eyes are getting weak.
I was just going to remind you who you're on the podcast with every subtle moment. Craig, you are, and you have been for many, many years, an industry expert. I lean on your expertise. You know what's going on. You're very candid, honestly, and that's really important because we don't want to sugarcoat this. This is not a...
No. Look, yeah. No. Listen, I appreciate candor. You know, I like you. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and when I listen to Smoke and Mirrors, I want to roll my eyes. Would you just say how you're really feeling, what you're really experiencing out there? Because that's what realtors, investors, buyers, developers want to hear. So yeah, I'll throw it down the middle.
Okay, so that's what you're going to get.
Yep.
And this episode, I'm going to title it, What Does 2025 Hold? Making moves in Miami, making moves in Florida. Who is buying and who isn't?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. So,
it's a lot.
It's a lot. There's a lot to unpack. So let's get into it. So, Craig, let's start. Let's give everyone a bit of context as we're sitting here in February 2025. Let's go through, take us through, as you saw it, what happened last year and what are you seeing now as we are 2 months in, nearly at the end of 2 months in, at the end of 2025?
From ISG's perspective, related ISG's perspective, we saw from January, I'll say through, mid-September, exact repeat of 2023. Decent velocity, prices going up, a lot of buyers entering the marketplace, not just people moving to Florida to rent, but people looking here to buy. But I never expected it would slow down real estate sales. But anyway, the general election happened, first Tuesday of November. And then I kind of expected in a week or two, things are going to pop. Despite the fact that Thanksgiving's the end of the November, and that tends to slow things down, we should really see a pop. No pop in December. And that's not because of Art Basel. It's not because of Christmas and Hanukkah. Hanukkah was really, really late this year anyway. No, it was just really, really quiet. And then first of the year, well, it's now Happy New Year. It's 2025. Things are going to really pick up. No, first 2-3 weeks of January was a repeat of October, November, and December. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Mortgage rates the day before he got elected, a 30-year fix was 6.1%. And today, I guess it's 7.1 and went up a full 100 basis points, a full 1%. Which is somewhat ironic because he campaigned on, I'm going to lower rates. As we've discussed, you know, when he says words like tariffs, he ignites the inflation conversation.
Yeah.
And then the 10-year treasury bond, which mortgages are really tied to, it stays stubborn, and it kind of inched up a little bit even today. We need the 10-year treasury to relax a little bit. It was hovering around 4.5%. If it got down to 3.9, you would absolutely see mortgage rates drop. But the more he's using tariffs as his political leverage, which does seem to be working, as we both know, it's going to keep interest rates somewhat high. So but then here we are the second week of February. I noticed the last week of January, things picking up a little bit compared to the time I just described. And if you want to ask me, what do I think? Why? I think people just got used to 7% 30-year fixed rate mortgages being the new normal. And the population just continues to grow. We still have more and more and more Americans, mostly Americans, moving to the whole state of Florida, particularly South Florida. We all experience it every time we drive a car, every time we want to go anywhere from point A to point B, which actually gives rise to a whole new post-COVID condominium development concept, which maybe we can get into a little bit later. So I've noticed that sales have suddenly picked up. Not dramatically, but compared to the previous months I just referred to, it's more than welcomed.
So there's a little bit that I want to unpack on what you just kind of
Sure.
explained, which is fantastic. Explain, and then this just comes to mind, the inflationary aspect, the tariffs. Obviously, Trump applying tariffs to, obviously, I think it's Mexico and Canada and
threaten Colombia.
Explain how, I mean, we know, but for the audience to really get their head around it, explain how this affects inflation. How is this so inflationary?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I've read. Is what the talking heads on TV say. If the tariff is really enacted, then let's talk about goods that come from Mexico. Or actually, let's go to Colombia. Because remember, it was about 3 Sundays ago, President Trump called President Petro and said, hey, I'm sending a plane of a bunch of bad guys. They're landing at 3 o'clock this afternoon or whatever time. And Petro said, no, we don't want them. And Trump said, tariff. Well, about 30 minutes later, Petro said, oh, sorry, Mr. President, we'll take them. Well, let me tell you what that tariff, I know a lot of people in Bogota, Colombia, that are florists.
Well, it's funny. I've got a very good friend of mine at school. We may know the same person.
We might.
He's a florist, and he literally said on a Saturday, he was like, a lot of the other guys who are working in business, they started calling their suppliers, and he said, I'm going to wait. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to wait because a lot of sometimes what's said is not Trump saying, I'm going to do this. He's saying, get in line. I'm warning you, this is my game.
Yeah.
But whether he's actually going to apply it or not, it's more of a gesturing position. It's a puffery position that clearly, I mean, it's been working for him.
Well, yeah. Well, the 2 biggest imports from Colombia are coffee and flowers. The flowers in Colombia were freaking out. All of a sudden, here's what it means for inflation. So if a dozen roses costs, I'm going to pick a number, $100.
Yeah.
Well, now it's going to cost $125 to $135 because the impact of the tariff is passed on to the consumer.
Of course.
Boom. No matter what good or service you refer to.
Yeah.
And when that happens, then the 10-year Treasury, which mortgages are tied to, stays stubborn. Interest rates stay high when there's inflation.
Of course.
Jerome Powell was inching rates down a little bit, as he said he would last year. I think he lowered like 3 times, a full 150 basis points. And they stopped because of politics. And not so much, partly because of politics, because the more Donald Trump says tariffs, the more the economist in him says, it's going to cause inflation. I'm not lowering rates anymore because I got to contain inflation.
Yeah. Well, the reality is all of this, these macro realities are a massive force on our market, and you need to really understand them to appreciate what you're going to do, whether you're a buyer or a seller watching this.
100%. No, you have to be sort of an amateur political scientist to sell real estate in Miami, moreover, to kind of forecast in your own mind what tomorrow's going to look like.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, our market is so international. It's very much domestic since COVID. Most of the sales are Americans moving here. That's what I mean by domestic. But South America last year, I will tell you, that was one big difference. I saw a strong rebound from Mexico.
Yeah.
In fact, I was in Guadalajara in early December. I was invited to present the Miami report, and to a bunch of guys, Mexicans, so all educated in the United States. These 2 guys went to University of Chicago. These guys went to Northwestern. These guys went to Northeastern. So their English is perfect. I actually had a blast in Guadalajara with them. But and it was really fascinating. There is remember the NAFTA agreement that was created by President Clinton? That's taken serious root. Last year, there were more imports that came into the United States from Mexico than China for like the first time in 40 years. That was impressive. There's a growing middle and upper middle class in Mexico with some serious money. Mexico used to be just the country of the haves and have-nots. No mas. There is a middle class that's making money, and they will love the U.S. real estate. They prefer Florida. They like Miami and Houston. Houston's close.
Yeah.
But real estate. And it was kind of fascinating. They were all kind of joking about the threat of tariffs because Trump wasn't inaugurated yet.
Being a European, I hear a lot of what's going on over there. Before we do, though,
Speaking of left,
exactly. Yeah, we will get into that.
Okay.
We will.
Let's go, buddy.
You said 2024 was Slowdown.
It did.
And September onwards, we thought things might pick up, and they didn't. What markets are you specifically referring to? Because I think it's good to put some context into this so we can understand.
Well, there are, I'm involved in some projects now in Broward County.
Your condo market, I mean, it's more mostly condo.
I mean, I've related to ISG, which is a general real estate company. That's my partnership with with the Perez family and the related group. And we do everything. We do what you tried it. We try to follow David Siddons and Douglas Elliman. We sell single family homes. We rent apartments. We sell condos. We'll lease shopping centers. I have a commercial division. We do all of that. But ISG is mostly a condo. We represent real estate developers. I decided to shift a little of my focus to condo conversions. And I did it because, two reasons. One, there are a lot of pre-construction projects in the pipeline. There's 84 of them at the moment. There were 84.
84 spread through South Florida?
Through Miami Beach, and Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
Not including
Palm Beach. Okay.
If you include Palm Beach, you could be closer to 90.
So not include Pompano, not including Palm Beach.
No, it doesn't include.
It doesn't include Pompano.
Right to the Palm Beach Broward line. So
okay.
I do include.
So Miami-Dade and Broward. No.
84.
Okay.
Of the 84, I've done the math, 75 are priced from $1.5 million to now $100 million. Super high end. Super expensive. In my opinion, too many. That's one problem. There's just too many choices now for people when they're coming here. That's one problem. The second problem is time of delivery. A lot of these, now of those, there's only about 12 that are actually under construction. That's all of the 80, of all 84. The rest of them are waiting for interest rates to come down. Because the borrowing costs, construction loans almost 12.
Well, it becomes non-profitable. I would imagine.
Totally. They have to wait. The use of the buyer deposits makes developing condos really attractive for condo developers because you can use all the deposits in excess of 10% for hard costs. And you're paying zero on that money. So that combined with a conventional construction loan, it makes building condos.
Yeah, it's challenging, especially when, and again, people have asked me many times, they're like, when you don't talk about a building, is that because you don't like it? And I'm like, bingo.
Yeah, but there's reasons.
But there's reasons I don't like it.
Yes.
But there is interesting. There's a few buildings right now that have come into the market. They literally opened their doors in the last 12 months. You can do the math or you can call me and I can then tell you. But there's a few buildings that opened their doors in the last 12 months that have a ridiculous number of units back for resale.
Yes.
And they're having a really hard time selling them. And there's one particular building that I think there's like 60 units. It's in the urban core.
In downtown?
It's in Denton.
Okay.
It's in Denton.
Another building you
We may do.
We're going to
name it.
Give me an E.
But there's Hangman. We'll play Hangman. How's that? We'll figure out. We'll do that at the end. Yeah. Stay tuned. And there's like 59 units for sale. And I got a call yesterday and a guy was like, I can't sell my unit. And I'm like, well, I know exactly why. Yeah. Because it's too expensive.
Yeah, one reason. Yeah. Depending on the building we're
and also more so that it's just it's nothing special. It was supposed to be something special and it just simply wasn't. And that's tough because that gets into buyer psychology as they start to look around, they start to see the market. There is, with that said, a massive chasm. I mean, talk about a tale of two cities. Within each city, there's two city behaviors going on. One market, two markets, one ultra luxury, one what I call working wealthy category. Because the markets that we deal with, we're not dealing with, I'm not selling $500,000 properties. Everything it's really like $1 million and up. It has to be $1 million and up. And in fact, in most cases, it's $2 million and up. But the behaviors between the two markets are really, really different. And I wanted to share with you, I was trying to do my research, trying to be a good boy here and do my research before we do this, because I know that you know numbers, and if I don't bring my A game, you'll roast me.
Oh, no, I will never roast you, but the A game, listen, numbers change every couple of weeks.
They do. So I just ran some numbers, and this is just some good fun facts. I decided to look at the housing market and the condo market, and I looked at the ultra luxury of the market. And when I look at just ultra luxury sales, in the first 42 days of this year, since January the 1st to today, there have been 44 sales over $10 million. This is through just the MLS search for South Florida, which is Miami up to like Palm Beach. There's 44 over 10 million. There was a sale at 50 million, which was the Ferrari house up in Delray Beach, which was well known. There was a $50 million sale in Palm Beach. Unsurprising. There's actually a bunch of sales like that in Palm Beach. There's one in Jupiter for 40. There was a penthouse on Miami Beach at 87 Park, which I understand was actually 31 million.
I understand the same thing.
And then pending deals, there was 80. There's currently, because the ones that closed now were actually in contract, or most of them would have been in contract before Christmas. So I'm not going to say that they suddenly got into contract in January the 1st and now closed. but there's 82 pending right now, which is a lot, over $10 million. It's a high number.
It's impressive.
There was a time when we wouldn't have, when 10 sales over, 100 sales over 10 million was considered unbelievable for a year. If you had a year where the market had more than 10 million, I mean, again, inflation's a thing, but sales over $10 million, that was huge. It was a huge year. But realities change fast, and sometimes we forget where we come from and we forget what we consider the norm, because we went through the pandemic and everything went crazy. And although we still refer back to it, it still has become such a natural part of the psychology, I believe, of buyers and sellers out there when they reflect back to what was happening in 2021 and 2022. But the pending sales is 82 over $10 million. There's a number of new home sales on Fisher Island, over $40 million. There's one in Palm Beach at 58, another one at 49, another one at 48. There's a lot of big sales that are now pending. But then when you go into the lower market, and this is when it gets interesting, things slow down a lot. The resale market. On the upper end market, the ultra luxury market has a lot of what we call shadow sales, kind of like shadow inventory. It's not recorded because people who are uber wealthy don't want their stuff recorded on the MLS. Right. They're trading off market. I know the biggest agents, as you do, in South Florida, and I know that being discreet is an absolute prerequisite for your ability to be an ultra-luxury agent. You will not have clients at a certain frequency if you can't keep your goddamn mouth shut. Because these are celebrities. They're famous businessmen and women and sports celebrities and, moguls and everything you can think of. It's
kind of always been like that with Live in America, because they never wanted anybody to know what they were buying in Miami. They didn't necessarily have to be uber rich. Yeah. But now the uber rich, they're moving to Miami. They have the exact same requirements. Sometimes they absolutely close in a family trust, which means when it gets recorded in a tax deed, you don't even really need to record the price that they pay. They've gotten very good at their anonymity.
Absolutely. And so I believe that there's probably well over 100 pending deals over $10 million right now. But I would think that's probably fair to say. But when we go into the lower level, into the $3 million and under, the condo market has been rising actually since 2022. Brickell, downtown Edgewater, Bar Harbor to south of Fifth. Sales have been going down and inventory has been rising.
Right.
And that's been a reality. Unfortunately, I think sometimes the problems that we have is it doesn't match with the seller psychology. The seller psychology sees Miami growing. It sees Ken Griffin on the front of a magazine. It sees new towers going up. It sees great wealth migration. And people naturally assume Miami's booming, therefore the market's great, therefore I should be getting top dollar.
And a lot of those projects you're referring to were underwritten, say, in 2020 and 2021 when the mad rush out of COVID-sensitive areas to Miami occurred. And let's talk about Brickell for 1 second, because I'll tell you, part of the reason I'm in Broward is I'm seeing a lot of people from Miami wanting to relocate not out of South Florida, to Broward because it's less crowded. Miami got really
traffic has become really, you see it as an issue. I had to get out of Brickell yesterday to come back home, and I think partly because they're doing roadworks on Brickell Avenue, but it took me an hour and 15 minutes to get back home.
Yeah, forgive the tangent, but last week I had a business lunch and I was running a little bit late, and I guess I was driving my Range Rover a little too aggressively. And I had to stop at a red light, and the guy in front of me got out of the car and gave me one of these. I guess I was tailgating him a little too aggressively. And I thought, oh my God, road rage is happening all the time now. I didn't mean to be rude. I was just a little late for a meeting. I don't think I was even that bad, but it's going to get a little tight. Getting back to the underwriting. During 2021, I got a lot of calls from developers that are now trying. You're right. They have certain expectations and they're not paying attention to the reality of what's happening. There's a couple of projects in Brickell I really like. One is St. Regis by related because of where it is. It's right on the water. You're right next to Santa Maria. You're in that area of Brickell that is 90% residential. There's no hotels, no office buildings.
It's quiet.
They're all condos. And of course, the residents of Mandarin. Brickell Key is Brickell.
Which is the shining one in Brickell that we know about.
But the rest of them,
there is someone struggling.
They're struggling.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you what happened. I know. I look at the numbers, and the numbers tell the whole story. Last year, 2/3 of all the condo resales in Brickell were one bedrooms. That's a bit sobering. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So what do you make of that? Take us down that rabbit hole.
Sure. I've sold a bunch of projects in Brickell before COVID, and it seems to me that Brickell is returning back to what she was. She was a 1 and 2 bedroom urban condo market. Then, honestly, by 1819, we started getting a little more demand for some 3 bedrooms. Then COVID happened, and here's my opinion: Brickell Avenue is a brand. It's Lakeshore Drive. It's Rodeo Drive. It's Park Avenue. When you tell people I'm moving to Miami, where I want to go,
name one. They'll say, maybe an interesting poll. Name the first street that comes into your head in Miami.
Brickell.
Somebody would probably say Brickell Avenue. They used to probably say Ocean Drive.
Or Collins Avenue.
Collins.
Right? But Brickell is a brand.
Yeah.
When my friend Alicia Severa named the project that she's promoting, 1428 Brickell, some people, I heard them say, "Oh my God, why didn't they give it a name?" They did. The address is a brand. Brickell is a brand. I think it's
like Park Avenue in New York. It's
you walk up and down Park Avenue. That building is called 200 Park Avenue. This is 310 Park Avenue. Those folks that live in those buildings like that they're not branded because they want to talk about affluent people. They want that logo.
It is the brand.
But I think what happened was a lot of folks relocated and then went to Brickell. They went to Park Avenue. They went to Rodeo Drive. And then they lived there for a year or two. And then they said, whoa, this place is awfully crowded. But more than that, they started to discover other neighborhoods here in South Florida they would prefer to live in. Some prefer to live in a house. Coconut Grove, it went completely transformed.
Well, and I've noticed this, maybe this is a phenomenon just to kind of like ponder for a moment, is that during that period of big migration, there were a lot of people who came and they didn't know where they wanted to be. And the easiest place to access for a rental, the most abundant location for a rental was Brickell.
Yep.
1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. And they built a bunch of 3-bedroom units, which wasn't the typical model at the time. And they were kind of small, but people would rent them. And then a couple of years go by. And when they were doing that during the pandemic, they were, let's say, 28 years old, 27 years old. Well, now we're 2025. Yeah. They're not 27 years old anymore. Or 28. Now they're 31, 32. Right. And guess what happened during that period of time?
They probably fell in love.
They probably fell in love and babies were born in South Miami Mercy Hospital.
Yes. Exactly.
And I see that a lot now. I see so many young families. If you just go through the Grosvenor Gables now, I mean, it's like, I feel like it was a boom. There was a baby boom. I'd love to know actually the population growth in children being born over the last 4 or 5 years in Coconut Grove and Coral Gables. Statistically, I would imagine that's a spike. So if anybody has that data out there, or anybody works within them, anybody who works in the hospitals, and I would love that information. I think that'd be an interesting conversation.
Because the profile has changed. But I do think what happened to Brickell specifically is people realized there were other neighborhoods that I would prefer to live in that are a little less dense. So consequently, you've got Brickell returning back to what I always refer to it, to neighborhoods in the feminine gender. She returned to back to what she was. You're the developer who underwrote a project during 2021 when you saw the big boxes moving like crazy. The 2-bedroom and dens, the 3 bedrooms, my God, we ran out of them. So let's design a building with 3 and 4 bedrooms. Whoa. You kind of reacted to a reaction, or you overreacted to a reaction. The reaction was COVID. Things have sobered up now. Yeah. The folks that have moved here have determined what neighborhoods they really want to live in. And Brickell got a little too crowded.
It was a little, sometimes there's a point with square footages when you go what I call the in-between crowd, where you're not one and you're not the other, and therefore you don't really work for anyone. And by that, I mean the large 2 bedrooms plus den and 3 bedrooms, which seemed like a really good idea as people would come together and people would share apartments. And, inflationary aspects, people, some do. I'm going to show lots of 3 bedrooms. You'll see people sharing. But ultimately, the buyers who want it for an end use, they're either renting in something small, or they're going much bigger, or they're going to a house. And either you are there. I don't think if you're going to do a big unit, you've got to make it luxury, because that's the other side of the coin that we'll come to on the flip end when we go to the ultra luxury end, where they're going with that kind of construction type. You have to get bigger. We ran out of big units in Coconut Grove. Look at Park Grove. Absolutely killed the market. Yes. It was like selling like crazy. Even today, trying to find an A-line in Park Grove is painful. It's like pulling teeth. Hard to find it.
In 2017 and 2018, I was selling Reach and Rise in Brickell City Center for Swire Properties. ISG was. And I got a call from my dear buddy Matt Allen. He's the chief operating officer of Related. Hey, George wants you to go look at Park Grove. So why? He wants you to audit the whole sales experience. Now, I'm part of them Related ISG. Sure, happy to do it. I said, what's the problem? The sales are terrible. Now listen, here it is, 2025.
Well, yeah.
The project is so hot.
Most buildings need a little time to bed in.
Yes.
We go through it right now. I know Park Grove, when it first opened, it's kind of like the energy. The energy doesn't get going because people are moving in and there's workers there and there's banging going on, and sometimes all the amenities aren't opening. I think Mr. C is going through that right now. It doesn't have quite the energy because all the facilities aren't fully operating. But just like Park Grove, I remember just before the pandemic, it was harder to sell those units, and units were much, much lower. And then obviously once things get bedded in, the community takes hold, because these buildings need this sense of community, then you're off to the races. They do really, really well. But as we go through from these smaller units and we get into it, so I guess that the lesson, and this is before we get into the luxury market, because I want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
The lesson that we see in that lower end right now, for those people who own units out there in the market, let's say you're in Brickell or downtown or Edgewater, and you're seeing inventories growing.
Right.
Things are slower, and actually we see a lot of expired listings happening. We're seeing a lot of expired listings, and I think I know why. I think it's very clear why these listings are expiring, because they just wanted too much money.
That's one
They're
reason.
too greedy.
Sure. Yeah. And some of them too are in these older buildings that are 30, 40, 50 years old. And
that's a totally other animal.
yeah, they know there's no way those units are selling right now. First of all, you need a cash buyer, because mortgage lenders won't touch a building now at the moment that's over 30 years of age, because the structural engineering reports are still coming in. Special assessments are two ugly words that are being spread on all these buildings. And it's real. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
And the lenders don't want to lend into that black hole, so you need a cash buyer.
We've talked about this actually a number of times in previous podcasts over the last couple of months about the phenomenon of the older buildings becoming a big elephant in the room, a big problem.
At the moment.
What do you say to the owners of these units in these older buildings? What is the dialogue that you would have with them?
If you don't need to sell, don't. Wait. Now, it depends on the building, too. So,
okay. Yeah, I was going to say, expand on that.
Well, there are some buildings that could be 30, 40, 50 years old in really great locations, intracoastal, oceanfront, that have been properly maintained. They may have some structural issues, and they may need some special assessment, but it's not going to be obnoxious. A $25,000, $50,000, maybe up to $100,000 special assessment in today's world in Miami is not that crazy. But when you start hearing $150,000, $200,000, up to $350,000 in special assessments, I try. That's a tough conversation, because they've got a real problem, because there's nobody's going to buy that stuff, and if they've got a mortgage, they got to continue to pay on it. It's a mess, and they can hold out. Their only remedy is to hold out and wait for a big development company like Related, like Two Roads, real strong development, PMG, to come in and buy it at a number with the purpose of imploding.
Some of them have what I would call, they're fundamentally sound. It's like buying a classic car. They've got their good solid building, and they've actually got good floor plans. They're actually well designed, like the Santa Marias of this world. And there's a building actually in Val Harbor that I saw a bunch of units at called the Palace, which is 10101 College. Sure. And the unit floor plans there are phenomenal. You get amazing, and they're very redeemable. It's worth investing in those units, putting money into them, because they actually do really well. And there are buildings that now they're a little older. They're not old, but there are buildings that I would look at and say to a client, look at the floor plan here, like St. Regis in Val Harbor. It's not a really old building. There are through-flow units that are really phenomenally laid out. But then, of course, there are buildings which you look at them and you go, this is like those long corridors. It looks like Carrie in that Stephen King. You expect to see two children on tricycles coming towards you. Like really dark and foreboding.
Seeing my head.
Yeah. Like dark, foreboding corridors, and you go into these units and they're kind of pokey and the ceilings are like 8 foot high. And you just think, who's going to want to put money into this?
Yeah, no, they're not. That's a tougher one. I have New Yorkers a couple of folks I know from Chicago, though, that are poking at some of like a Palace, some of the older buildings that are actually pretty well maintained. They may need a little special assessment. There's some great buys in some of these buildings because they're undervalued, simply because they're old, not because they're not worth it. Those are going to be some very interesting buys, but you're seeing, and here's the other crazy irony, that is the inventory that's growing like crazy. The inventory that's less than 30 years old, condo inventory, particularly the condo inventory that's less than 10 years old, No tenemos. We don't have it. That's where most Americans that are moving here, or even they're Latins, they're reading about the special assessments attached to these older buildings, and they're asking most realtors, don't even take me there. I want a younger building with more modern amenities. I want the ceiling, the interior ceiling of my condo to be 9 and 10 feet, not 8. I want bigger kitchens and baths. But you're going to find that with the newer product. And what I have, even though last year was slower than 23, that inventory got gobbled up.
Yeah. And there's these new pockets that are developing through the city. I was having a great conversation with Kobe Karp, and I was asking him, how do we understand the city as it will be 5 years from now? How do you envisage it? What does it look like? Mm-hmm. And sometimes we assume we'll take a neighborhood and it will just keep growing, kind of like, just growing. He goes, no, it doesn't really work like that. What happens is there's a point where a neighborhood will grow to a certain size, and then things start to limit its growth, such as traffic flow.
Exactly.
Like Brickell. And then people will find a new pocket to go to, new areas that will emerge of a desirable development. And I look at, you're seeing the rise of Pompano Beach getting developed. You're seeing North Bay Village starting to take on new shape. Bay Harbor Island taking on new shape. Hollywood taking on new shape. And Palm Beach, suddenly resurgences in Palm Beach that used to be a bit more West Palm Beach.
Right. Even Dania. Dania.
What are are you noticing within these pockets? Because I'm seeing more focus on those pockets now. Because there's still an element of when you come to Miami, you want the blue sky, blue water, sandy beaches. You want the lifestyle, the health and wellness lifestyle that you don't have when you're in New York or other cities.
Correct. No, I tell everybody, listen, I grew up in New Jersey, so I know how most people in America that don't live in South Florida see South Florida. They see water. They see palm trees. They see attractive people. When you're selling someone who's moving here from the state, from wherever in the United States, the condo needs to have a view of some of what I just described. And if you're looking into another building, that's a very tough sell because they left New York, Chicago. They had that there. Not here. That's one problem. The other problem is they want nice amenities because they imagine, remember the Etch-a-Sketch board we played with as kids?
Yeah.
They move here. They take the Etch-a-Sketch board, they turn it upside down, and they store it over again. It's not to get off on a tangent, it's one of the reasons why having vibrant, from personality perspective, attractive people, salespeople in a developer sales office is so key. Because when people are coming here from various states, they see their new life taking shape in Miami, and they want that. They want that vibrancy that they imagine Miami will offer. A condo is an extension of that, particularly when you get to look at the water. So some of these, I think Kobe's right, for not to overly pick on Brickell, because Brickell's still a really cool neighborhood. But when you're selling a new pre-construction and you can't assure somebody a nice view looking at water, especially when you're asking for 3, 4, 5, 6 million, that's a tough sell because that's kind of what they want. That's condo living. Part of the reason I'm selling a project in North Bay Village called Shoma Bay. Funny thing about North Bay Village is kind of an interesting real estate story. It was about 3 years ago when the city of North Bay Village changed the zoning on the north part of Treasure Island. It's because there's 3 islands in North Bay Village to 150 units per acre. That's Brickell. That's very, very dense. That's what's giving rise to
very different
to Sunbeam Properties, which they're going to build. They have 13 acres. Brickell City Center is 11.5 acres. This is 13 acres. They are going to build what I'm calling Brickell City Center.
I've seen the plans, because I know they're building Continuum that they're building. Pagani, he's down the street.
Pagani's to the west.
Yeah, they're doing a soccer field that's being funded like 10 million, and then the shopping mall. I mean, this is a whole new, this isn't 1 or 2 things happening. This is like a whole slew of things to rebuild and create a whole new village. I mean, it's a village already, but like a village. Right?
Yeah, but it's just a slice of the northern part of the island, David. The southern part is zone single family homes, 20 or 30 feet. That's it.
Yeah.
12 units to the acre. That's single family home density. So North Bay Village is becoming quite an interesting transition story because think about what I just said. Everybody wants a water view. Shoma Bay, beautiful water views. Same with Continuum. Same with Pagani. Related bought a piece of a peninsula in North Bay Village that they, like 2 or 3 older condos that they're going to eventually implode and build a beautiful condominium community. They're going to brand it. I don't know what the brand is yet now, but I've been kind of consulting with them on what I think they could get per square foot given my experience. But that's an example of what Americans are starting to like, because when they move to Miami, they get to see the water. It's a big deal. Now, if you can't get in Miami, or they think Miami's too expensive, they're going to Broward, and they're discovering neighborhoods like Hollywood, even Hallandale, Dania, Pompano, because it's less dense. The views are very, very nice, and the prices are half of Miami, and that kind of matters because Miami did get very expensive.
It got pricey. And all of this, I mean, the one commonality that I find when people approach me and they're coming in, and I still get, since the beginning of the year, although things have been slow, me and my team, we've been busier than we've ever been. I'm getting more calls than ever. I'm getting more engagement than ever. More people are telling me, hey, I want to know what to invest in, where to put my money. A lot of investor conversations. My God, the amount of money that wants to get deployed right now into South Florida is crazy.
South Florida real estate, isn't it interesting?
It is interesting. And it's why I want to bring up the next part of the conversation, which to me is probably one of the most interesting. The people of South Florida, the people who live here, and the people who are moving here. I want to dive into that more specifically, because one of the things that gets asked to me and my team all the time is, so if I move here, who am I meeting? Who am I seeing? Who's here today and who's going to be here tomorrow? Because 5 years from now, it could be very different. You told me just before you started rolling that you just had you had a trip to Dubai. Dubai's demographic shifted. There's actually been an enormous wealth migration out of the UK. 10,000 millionaires left the UK in 2024.
Where'd they go?
Dubai, the US.
Okay. It's a lot of
Monaco. It was a lot of it was the entrepreneurial flow. People leaving. And
see why the U.S. would be very attractive.
Yeah, and it comes into the conversation, which is the crowd, because within the crowd you've got your income, you've got your political allegiances, which way you're going to go, you left or right, and then you've got your social needs. Why you move somewhere, what you're going to do. And it was interesting to see the play out of the UK and that exodus happen. And there was, you talk about quality of life. The UK, obviously, it has great natural entrepreneurial spirit. You just look at great music. How many great bands come out of the UK? How many great writers come out of the UK? There's so many businesses that have come out of the UK. But they don't stay. They've just left. And now they've left at ridiculous numbers. And it's interesting to see that so much of what we've received in Miami has been a lot of that entrepreneurial business flow from around. And people who are coming in looking at condos, they have their own businesses.
Yes.
They're very wealthy, or they're involved in big brands, big names like Citadel. But they've come in and they are now setting up and making a play for Miami, South Florida as their home.
It's interesting. I was invited on a podcast a week ago, and this is a real estate broker named Stephanie Cabral. She is from the Dominican Republic, and she doesn't come here as often as she used to, but like every time you come here, Miami looks a little bit differently.
Yeah.
She was asking me the same question, kind of where you're going. I said, it's a funny thing. I have a 39-year-old son and a 38-year-old daughter. We call those millennials. I'm a baby boomer. Baby boomers, we finished college. We got a job with a big corporation. We got a nice fat salary. At least we thought it was fat. We got health benefits. We got holidays off. We saved them. We bought a house, fell in love, bought a house, had some kids, lived a nice life. We weren't thinking entrepreneurial. Working for a big company was like a privilege.
Yeah.
These millennials are entrepreneurs. They're not going to go to work for some big Fortune 400, Fortune 500 company at first. They want to start their own game. That's so much of the profile of the younger people that are moving here. They are very entrepreneurial thinking, and most of them are doing pretty well, at least the ones that I don't.
Well, in order to live in Miami or South Florida, you have to do it.
You have to do it.
You have to be the ones who made it.
Well, actually, that's true, because I did read a report from the Mayor Suarez's office that a lot of the folks that left Miami in the last couple of years were people in their 20s and 30s that just couldn't afford houses.
Well, that was obviously you've got the Gen Zs who obviously have a challenge because they've been brought up with a different set of expectations.
Right.
To say certainly the millennials and the Gen Xers, we're a whole other, ball game. We're a dangerous group to deal with. But yeah, we survived. We're survivors of the 70s and 80s, which means we put up with a lot of craziness.
Yes.
So
the 70s, that was a
yeah.
good time.
But the obviously the Gen Zs, they're going through this situation of challenging, and in order, they want to succeed, they want to do well, but they want fast track, which gets problematic. The millennials are obviously the big buying group. They're the ones who really have the buying power now. They're the ones who are on it, and obviously my generation who are on the upper end, who are now buying the super expensive stuff.
And then you got the baby boomers, which is my generation, which are really thinking about kind of downsizing.
Well, yeah, they're going the other way, but they're also coming down here as well because of quality of life. What are you seeing? What would you say, as someone would turn to you and say, how would you explain the demographic coming down here? And do you see it changing the next few years?
I just see it continuing to get more wealthy.
Yeah.
Yes, I had dinner. I'm very proud of my son. He's a managing director of UBS Bank. UBS practically rented the Ritz-Carlton in Key Biscayne first few days of this week for one of their annual conferences, and they had all kinds of guest speakers. Yesterday, Ken Griffin was there. He spoke for 45 minutes. So I took my son to dinner last night. I said, "What do you have to say?" He said, "Dad, he's telling us, he made it very clear that this new Miami, this wealth migration that's coming to Miami, it's just started. Companies that are coming here to complement the other Fortune 400 and Fortune 500 companies that are dropping anchor here, they're attracting businesses all over the world, not just the U.S. Now, this is the constraint we have is truly traffic. The infrastructure needs to be thought through a little bit, because eventually Kobe Karp's right. Eventually you hit those, call it the law of diminishing returns for neighborhood transformation, because you just can't fit anybody else in a neighborhood. So they're going to start finding other places. But no, I think if there's somebody coming from out of town, some people call Brickell Avenue the Wall Street South. Some folks call Palm Beach Wall Street South.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Either way, you've got a lot of hedge funds, banks, from all over the world, particularly Latin America, that are relocating here to South Florida. There's a reason they're coming here.
Well, I kind of feel they
people like to be close to their money.
They probably have relocated. They're already here, because those numbers that we talked about, 15 minutes ago, touching on those 82 pendings, which is really over 100, and those sales that we've had and through last year, there are big transactions right now. There are big pending deals that I'm seeing in Gables Estates and all through Miami, and I'm seeing builders building, and they're not building at the same level that they're building before, the single family homes. This is the conversation that I have talking to the ultra wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we have this conversation, we've had it many times, talking about from early last year, Ken Griffin and the hedge funds. I don't think sometimes people understand what that actually means, because immediately they're like, it's kind of like the left side, and this is the problem that we had in the UK. The left side is like, I don't care what the millionaires and billionaires do. I just don't care if they leave, because, they're all entitled, and we all got to support, and everyone should blend out the average and come together, and, it's not bad that they left. The reality is that extreme wealth brings huge amounts of income into whatever system it's moving into.
I agree completely.
So do not underestimate the impact of the wealth on you. You might say, well, Ken Griffin lives in the Grove now, and he bought $100 million place, and he bought his place in Palm Beach, and he keeps buying stuff, and Elon Musk buys stuff, and Jeff Bezos buys stuff, and all these other guys buy stuff. But I don't live in that world, so it doesn't really matter to me, because what they're buying isn't what I'm buying.
Mm-hmm.
But it affects the economy that you live in.
Big discretionary money, and they spend the money, and it's a great shot in the arm for any local economy. The only downside is the cost of housing gets bigger.
Well, that's it, and that's why I guess if you want to have a conversation, and again bringing back to the buyers and sellers out there and how they're trying to figure out what's going on, the observation that I have is that the tale of two cities, the ultra wealthy, the price point of the ultra wealthy buyer, it keeps going up.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's
amazing to me.
I'll give you one little anecdotal story. I'm standing at the side of a football field last week, talking to a buddy of mine. He was an ex-NFL player, and I don't know how the conversation came up, because a whole bunch of people were talking about it. And because everyone knows I'm in real estate. They said, Dave, do you hear about that situation that Tom Brady, who bought his place for like 20 million 6-7 years ago, he's just been offered 150? I'm like, I didn't hear that story, but I can believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's true or not, but I can absolutely believe that being very, very possible, because there is an extreme finite supply of ultra luxury real estate. So if you own an extremely prime piece of real estate, let's say it's inside a gated community, let's say it's a really large lot of land, let's say it's on the water, that product is going to keep moving. No matter what happens, that product's going to keep moving. And the benchmark for the top dollar per square foot, or not even the dollar per square foot, the actual sale is going to go up. Why? Because the size of the product they're building is going up.
Right.
And I wanted to start to go into the scale of the product that we're seeing, because we just got off the conversation talking about what DeMac's doing.
Yeah.
There's another developer doing that as well, but huge properties.
Huge. And DeMac, that they bought the Champlain Tower site, it is indeed an incredibly valuable piece of real estate. Prices range from, I went to the opening, it was a Selman opening. The penthouse is about 12,000 square feet with its own private swimming pool on the roof, asking $100 million. That's an eye opener, to say the least.
There have been, that was interesting, because there have been units that have cropped up through Miami over the last 5 years that have been 12,000, 15,000, 20,000 square feet penthouses.
Right.
But what was interesting is they typically sat in buildings where there was 1,200 square foot units, 1,500 square foot units, 2,000 square foot units. But DeMac's project, they're starting their smallest unit at 5,000 square feet.
The Chairman Hussein,
$15 million.
Mac, he told me, I'm going to build the largest apartments on the Gold Coast of South Florida. That's Miami Beach up to Palm Beach. Well, Mr. Hussein, congratulations. You won the prize. Those are really, the average size is 7,000 square feet. I told you I did a lot of consulting work for them. In fact, one of the things I told them you really ought to do that I learned from Arte was that indoor swimming pool. I did a few resales at Arte, and every time I'm there, it's usually later in the afternoon, and there's somebody getting out of that indoor pool. And so every time I ask the maintenance guys, this thing really gets used? Senor, every morning and every afternoon up until about 7 o'clock. We have to allocate 30 minutes of usage because it's a lap pool, but it gets used. And what's really nice is there's this hint of eucalyptus in the air whenever you're there. It's so inviting to want to jump in. But I thought to myself, folks that live, I'll call them baby boomers, my age, we're getting a little nervous about too much exposure to the sun. So when I'm not looking to bake myself on a Sunday afternoon, but I am interested in doing laps, I can do it in my pool, and especially my indoor pool. It's the only condo.
It's the health and wellness lifestyle.
100%.
People are realizing now, we live in the US, there's a large movement that we've seen where people are generally looking at the US as a landmass and saying the US is not, in many cases, promoting because of big pharma, and this is a whole other conversation. And I'm not, going into that political arena, but big pharma, big food are producing or affecting the health and wellness of its population. There's foods that are illegal in Europe, food contents, colored dyes and things like that, Red 40, that are completely illegal in Europe, but they're totally legal in the US. And people are getting sick, and people are very concerned. If I have the money, if I have the capacity, there's several things I want to do. I want to live better. I want to live healthier. I want to live well. There's a project in the Grove called The Well, which is really built around that. They're actually going to go and test the people who move into the building. I was with the developer this morning. They're going to test the people once they buy a unit. They're going to give them a full screen, their entire body. And then a year later, they're going to test them again.
Oh, my God.
There's 13 different screening processes to go through.
By the way, I saw your presentation on The Well in Coconut Grove, and I thought you did a very good job.
Thank you very much.
Because you really explained architecturally how the building flows. Nobody does that. I do that, by the way. I explain a day in the life of every building.
Well, this is what people want. Everyone's trying to envisage what your life would be like. Anywhere that you buy, whether it's a house or a condo, whether it's new or old, you're trying to envisage. People are trying to call me, and what they're really saying in everyday conversations, I'm sure they say to you, is try to help me envisage what my life would actually be like.
Well, actually, I don't really, I actually offer that. I maybe they're too polite to ask me that, but that's how I try to train my sales team. Look, explain the day in life here, because a building that's really architecturally well thought out, like you did with the well, it's an interesting story. And I promise you, by the way, you want to close this deal? The next realtor won't do it because they don't think like that. But the buyers eventually go home and they go, hey, I wonder what it's like when you park the car. How do I get into the building? How do I get to the mail? How do I access the swimming pool? Well, if someone were to explain this and explain how the architects very thoughtfully consider this, maybe even had a kitchen sink argument with the developer while they were designing all the X's and O's, they will really appreciate, and it goes to the value of what you're trying to sell. Listen, developers are pigeonholed in South Florida, particularly in Miami, with very, very high land costs. Construction costs are up almost 50% from COVID. Partly because of the inflationary impact. Insurance is up over 300%. Yeah. When I say they got pigeonholed, they don't have any choice but to go high end. It's the only way it maths out for the developer. The developer has to make a profit. Otherwise, why get out of bed every day?
Right? Well, the high end problem that I've seen, the high end problem I've seen is the delivery of the high end product as perceived in the mind of the buyer. When they look at the pictures, they look at the renderings, they imagine their lifestyle. Let's say they come from New York or California, and they know what that luxury feels like because they've actually lived it. They're trying to sometimes have a hard time when they get there and they go, is it really going to be like this? And it's from the moment that they look and see, can that material be built? Can it be delivered as they say they're going to deliver it? And will the experience match the story that they've told me on the video? Because every video that a developer produces, this is no knock at developers, but it's the reality. I can, if you want me to be a script writer for a new development project, this is how the story goes. Beautiful couple drive up to the building.
Here we go.
Lady gets out the car. Smoke show. Beautiful. Guy gets out the car.
Side of her dress. Here we go.
Stupidly handsome dude. Yeah. They walk in, absolutely dripping in money. They're driving an amazing car. And they walk to the lobby. The whole time, they're absolutely in love. And they get more in love as the story goes on. By the end of the video, they're literally in bed. And of course, then they're looking at the views and they're sipping their glass of wine, and they always seem to be enjoying a cocktail. Oh, yeah. I guess there's a lot of beautiful alcoholics.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And they go through this day in the life of, and of course it's magical. And of course that's what you're selling the dream. But I think explaining the neighborhood, because we don't literally, I don't think I've ever had a day when I've lived that particular day in the life. And I have a nice car and I have a beautiful wife and I have access to alcohol. But I don't think
that's what keeps you sane.
Exactly. And I don't think it's actually transpired like that. But I think that trying to get people to understand the environment, and one of the things that we look at is how the environments change, how they evolve, what you need, and what you need at a certain frequency, at a certain level. And I look at other cities. I look at London. I like London. I look at New York. I look at California. And I look at the possibility of recreating that day experience, that everyday experience that I would call it, not the once in a year day, but that everyday experience. Where am I most likely to be able to replicate that?
Right.
And guess what? It's here. That's why people ask me, do you ever want to go back to the UK? And I'm like, no, thanks.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't have that kind of day.
For those buyers that are a little skeptical of that beautiful Steven Spielberg video you just described, am I really going to live in this life? If you're buying from a developer with a very, very solid reputation, put your head on the pillow and sleep. More particularly if they brand it. Because these brands usually lock developers into certain specifications they can't wiggle out of. That's one of the things.
As long as they are, caveat, real brand connections and business. Because sometimes there's been a few what I call flimsy licensing agreements that have kind of passed.
Well, that's true.
Which have to be a little conscious of.
Yeah. But it is important to figure out, to determine if it is a licensing agreement or not, and what the term of it is. And some of these projects will lose their brand in 10, 12 years, and then what? Then it's you're off to a different situation. And then it's always going to be a man.
Yeah, it has to be. And when I think about, as we move forward, the expectation, the level of expectation obviously is very, very high. And once you deal with a higher, wealthier, concentrated crowd of uber wealthy, and that's what we're really dealing with. I mean, Miami and South Florida is not affordable for everyone. No. It's just not. That's just the reality of it. But for those who are coming here, who want that certain lifestyle, it's available. And you can see it. I mean, I see it not just within Miami, South Florida. I see it I don't know if infecting sounds negative, but in a way, good way, it's infecting other areas around this kind of peninsula of the country. Give me an example. I was talking to a developer, two people within the space of a week. One of them is a big builder down here in Miami that I've been good friends with for a very long time. And he said, I went down to the Exumas, down to Bahamas, there's a few of these little islands, lesser known islands, quieter areas. And the amount of huge private yachts that I'm seeing down there, and these little airports, the amount of private jets that I'm seeing landed there, people are developing down there like crazy, like unbelievable amounts of development. And the developers have all got their eyes on there because they want to build a rosewood, and they want to build a banyan tree, and they want to build, a Sixth Sense, and they want to build these private little enclaves for like 6 to 8 homes, so people can bring their own boat. This is like, the lifestyles of the rich and famous.
It's amazing how much money there is in the world, isn't there? I mean,
it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, especially when you drive down to the Keys. I mean, I don't know if you get a chance to get down there very often. I don't anymore. I haven't been there for a couple of years, but a couple of years ago, I went down with some buddies. I was invited to go play a little golf and do a little bit of fishing, and I couldn't help myself but to check out some of the local real estate. Oh my God. That's totally lifestyles of the rich and famous now. Miami's expensive. That's insane.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder how much money is there in the world. And I'm at the point in my career where I'm starting to even wonder about the true value of money. You just recited some very interesting stats about the amount of condos or houses that have traded for over $10 million. David, 5 years ago, that would not have been possible. I mean, we might have had the same amount of transactions, but not at those prices.
And as good as that is, and there's like positive and negative forces through the system because of this. And I give you an example that's just coming into my head. Yes, it's great because it means more growth, it means more business for the very ultra wealthy. But at the other end of the spectrum, because I'm sure there's someone watching this video saying, "You." You can beat that out.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not. Why are you applauding these guys at this level? These billionaires? Because that's not me. I'm a guy. I'm at $1.5 million, $2 million, and costs are going up, and inflation's eating away at my paycheck, and the cost of rent's gone up, and unfortunately, when you have this group that comes in, the restaurants are able to start charging more. Costs go up. Yep. Everything starts to go up. And so there are people at the lower end who are getting squeezed. And that, in turn, that squeeze on their pockets, in turns, puts a squeeze on what they can spend on other things, like rent. Which you made a very, very appropriate and apt and astute comment about, you've seen that the rent rates have dropped between 23, 24 and,
anywhere from 15 to 20%. From I'll call it the apogee, the 2022 and early 2023 high, where all these people came here. And what happened is you've got, just in Dade and Broward County, you have 60,000 multifamily units that got started in 2022, say, or maybe the end of 2021. About 25,000 of those have already been delivered. Now, those 25,000 were delivered affected rents by 10 to 20%. When the other 35,000 get delivered, which they're all under construction. I tell most people when they're here, all those cranes you see in the sky, those are not condos. Those are multifamily. Most of the condo developers are waiting for interest rates to drop so they can afford to build these buildings so they can make a profit. It's so frustrating for the people that buy into those buildings because, and not to get off on a tangent, but again, I'm going to quote Alicia Severa. She did a podcast over the weekend. I listened to a couple of times. I thought she was quite good. And she said that, from the beginning of Aston Martin, from the time they started pre-sale, from the moment she met the developer and started working on the floor plans until they got their CO was 10 years. From the groundbreaking to delivery was 6.5 years. That is a 70-story building. So these very, very tall buildings that are in pre-construction that haven't broken ground, they're not going to get delivered probably until the turn of the next decade. It's hard. You can hold an American, for even a wealthy European or a wealthy Latin that wants to live, say, Mandarin Oriental, the residents at Mandarin. Yeah, I can hold them all. I can hold some of the residents. Mandarin is different. I can usually hold. You probably have the same success. A couple years, maybe 3.
That's the challenge. That is the challenge. That timeline.
4 and 5. Oh my God!
Because you don't know where your life's going to be in 4 or 5 years from now. I don't. I mean, I think I have some idea. I think I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen. But my personal economic situation to global economic situation, national economic situation, or in 4 years from now, we got a whole new president. 4 years from now.
Listen, man, I'm in my late 60s. I can tell you that every 5 years your life does change. And it's the old story. People make plans and God laughs. Your life might work out exactly like you planned it. For most people, fate enters the play. And next thing you know, you're pointing north. Next thing you know, you're pointing south. That's part of the reason it's so hard to hold these folks off for so many years. I go to some pre-construction presentations. I'm always looking to hear a new sales presentation, that something I haven't thought about, because I'm always trying to perfect my own stuff. Well, I always get disappointed when I listen to the salespeople in some of these projects completely exaggerate the delivery dates, and a 70-story building can get built in 2 years.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said. I've got a friend of mine in New York. She said it beautifully. She was a big agent up in Manhattan.
We should clean up my English.
She called in-house sales agents house cats.
Okay.
She called them house cats because she said, if you put a house cat outside, it'll probably get eaten.
Yes.
And it'll get killed pretty quickly.
Yes.
And they don't survive very well. And that's not true for all in-house agents at all. I want to be clear. There's many in-house agents that I absolutely love that are fantastic, but there are some who don't give the right data and information.
No.
And they will say, and we've had this before, the ones I work with, the people that I introduce my clients to, I can trust. I know they're giving me the real information. Mm-hmm. It's the ones who come to me and say, yeah, this is going to be like $1.50 for HOA fee. And I'm like, no, it's not.
No way.
It's going to be, it's got to be somewhere. Decent buildings now have to be between $2 and $3 a square foot.
100%.
You have to be over $2. If you're giving a number under $2, I'm sorry, but I think you're BSing.
Well, you don't have a lot of amenities then.
Or you're very stripped out. But for those so well equipped,
right?
Yeah. It's not going to happen.
There's no way. Yeah, Mandarin is what, $2.50 or $2.70.
Yeah.
They have 90,000 square feet of amenities. It's magnificent. And by the way, it also falls into what I have noticed since COVID: the popularity of the all-inclusive condo. I'm getting ready to open up a project in Aventura. We call Port Aventura. We're not going to open it up until sometime this summer. This is an Israeli developer from New York City. And I've spent a lot of time with him, talking to him about all inclusive. We talked earlier about the traffic in Miami. It ain't going to get any better. No. People keep coming. Last year we had the highest daily population growth in the history of Florida was last year. It's in momentum, man. This isn't going to stop.
Yeah.
So what does all inclusive mean? You could park your car on a Friday and not need it until Monday. Because everything that you could possibly want, from grocery shopping to restaurants to lifestyle stuff,
your self-contained ecosystem.
It's all there. It's all there. It doesn't mean you don't want to go out, but the traffic's a bit daunting. We still live in the nicest weather in the world. It's going to be quite attractive, and with so many high net worth individuals. Your friend Anna Bosovich, I watch every one of your podcasts.
She's good. We love Anna.
I like her very much. I like her thoughtfulness. She does a lot of research. I mean, I think, as I said to you earlier, you and I are also on the boots on the ground, actually trading real estate.
Absolutely.
So I mix her data, her research, I use a lot of it in my MBA report.
That's the skill. Oh,
she's
taking the data and being on the world real application.
Yes, and then when you're nose to nose with the real buyer, they know you know.
So I wanted to conclude this out, because as we run through, I mean, we can keep talking forever and ever, and we've got the team around me, and they're all like, my God, these guys aren't going to stop talking, are they?
Well, real estate does that too.
It does. I actually wanted to conclude that the conclusions that kind of are drawn from this conversation have been several. First of all, those people in the rental-based markets who are thinking about selling, be aware that your rental numbers are not going to suddenly bump up massively. They're not going to jump. They're probably going to go the other direction. And there's a certain product that probably it's more generic is going to soften, and the market is soft. So don't reach for the stars.
And it may cause some of those property owners in multifamily to convert to condominium.
And we saw a spike in expired listings. For those people who have expired listings, and we've seen a greater increased number of expired listings across homes and condos in the last 6 months, a massive increase. To those people,
right?
If you have an expired listing, don't think by relisting with another agent that's going to fix all your problems.
Oh, no.
It's very often not the agent. It's sometimes something to do with the agent's skill set, but a lot of it is if you don't price it right and you don't have someone tell you the proper analysis of what it's worth today, it's not going to sell. If you don't come in line with the sales from last year and you are trying to shoot for a higher dollar per square foot than records will allow, in my mind, you are not going to sell that piece of real estate. That's in that mid and lower range.
You're
because
right.
interest rates are affecting us and everybody wants to make smart decisions right now. On the other end of the scale, that ultra wealthy, applaud and appreciate all those billionaires, millionaires moving in, because they will drive the economy forward in the next 5 years, and they'll make us all better off for doing so,
100%.
bringing in taxes and business and revenue and opportunities and making our lives easier and better. So don't hate them for it. Don't be on the left. Appreciate, I'm not saying be on the far right, but just appreciate that, that system that we see in Europe doesn't clearly work. That's why 10,000 Brits left last year. And appreciate that at this high end, if you are in that luxury sector, thank you so much. And when you're buying, recognize that, boy, you're not the only billionaire on the street. You've got competition, my friend. If you want that prime piece of real estate, that Gables Estates property, that Indian Creek Island property, that Peninsula Front property, that southeast corner penthouse, recognize that your competition is very much here, present, and ready to.
And those unique properties will always sell.
And if you can't find what you want right now, there's a very good chance it's being built. So start looking to the new developments, start looking to the new builders who are building these homes, and recognize that we see you, we hear you, and we're building for you.
Yes. Yep. David, completely. I mean, I always enjoy this, our rappy back and forth, really. This is going to be an interesting year. I think that, can I just conclude with one little thing? I when I first moved to Florida 32 years ago, I worked for a guy named Tom Daly. Tom was the guy that brought George Perez from Related into the Condo game. I was the sales director for Portofino Tower down in South Beach in 1994. I know I'm dating myself because I'm kind of old now. I don't know how the hell that happened, but it did. George was his joint venture partner. George signed on the construction loan. They did extremely well. Well, Tom unfortunately passed away 12 years ago. He really was a big loss because he was such a facile mind and a genius when it came to development. We've had some dips. At the outset of our conversation, I was honest. I said, hey, late September, October, November, December, it was dead, man.
I appreciate the honesty. That's good to have. We're not going to sit here and tell you everything's amazing.
I was closing my mind. I was reading self-help books again,
Usually has that I would love to see.
No, but Tom always said this. Remember last year, the National Association of Realtors said that last year was the slowest year of real estate sales around the country in 30 years. So it wasn't just us. It was the whole country. Now, here comes the Tom Daly quote. He always called me Craigula. Miami is usually the last city to go into a national slowdown, but it's the first one to pop out. So we might be in a little bit of a slowdown. And that little slowdown should encourage buyers to bust a move while sellers are a little nervous at the moment because it's not going to last. Miami will pop out. You give this new president a few more months where he really does make America stand tall again and people start cooperating with us a little bit. There's some of the things that he's doing I completely applaud. The Elon Musk variable fascinates me because I know he wants to inhabit Mars. I think he's from Mars. He's got a brain.
He's a funny fella.
He's got a brain that guy, and the things he says and the things that he does, it's pretty damn extraordinary. He's arguably the wealthiest man in the world now. I think I don't think this downturn is going to last more than a couple more months. I just don't because I've been here for 32 years and I've seen the Miami roller coaster and I'm already seeing things picking up a little bit in the last 3 weeks. So hopefully it's a nice omen for what.
Well, money has to travel somewhere. And it's there, and there's money in the market. There's absolutely so much money in the market. And it has to travel somewhere, and it's got a very high probability it's coming here.
Yes, it is.
If it's not here already.
David, Craig, thank you.
Thank you, as always. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Stay tuned for another episode of the Better Decisions podcast coming soon.
62's in the books.
Thank you. Done. That's a wrap.